And well met. This is Lavern with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to be checking out some AI tools to create your personal content for your campaigns. I use 3 different AI tools. This is based off of a year and a half of researching other AI tools. I used to use Midjourney and ChatGPT more and some others, but I found that over time you'll discover other tools that may fit your needs better. Since I'm not really developing anything commercially, this is more for personal use. I'm not too concerned about the use of AI, but if you are going to use AI, make sure that you follow the rules and restrictions on whatever portal or website that you're selling through. And also make sure that you make that disclaimer because a lot of people get upset once they realize that the content is made from AI. So also, I wanted to point out that the main reason I did this was to speed up things when I create content. So before I was writing things by hand or typing, and I have to admit I'm not a typist. I'm not very good at. I still do the looking at the keyboard. I'm not really a typer, so this really helps me. And I think if you had a disability or maybe arthritis or your vision wasn't very good, this might be helpful for that. But nonetheless, I'm going to go over a few tools that I use. I've done other videos on this, but I kind of wanted to bring some of it together and just kind of show like a use case and kind of go over different things. So we're going to start with a concept, and I'm going to use Grok, which is part of X. I was using Anthropic's Claude Sonnet 3, but I found that the cost and the limitations of the platform. I'm sure it's got better since I've used it a few months ago, but I kind of like the Grok thing. It is behind a paywall. I think it's like $90 for a year, which I think is totally worth it. And the other thing is I'm using Ideogram, the latest version for images and handouts and such. So that is, I think, $20 a month or so. And then Google LM Notebook or Google Notebook, that is free for now. It's in beta. So I use that for campaign management and for research. So I got 3 different AI tools that I use for different things. They all have strengths and weaknesses, but I think, going through ChatGPT, Midjourney, and all those things were great in the beginning to kind of get an understanding of how to word stuff for the things that you want to accomplish. I think that's one of the biggest struggles on most newer users to AI tools is to know what type of wording or the crafting techniques for, they call it, what do you call it, engineering. But I think it's just, having the information in your brain to ask AI tools what you want. So that's, you know, it's a prompt engineering thing, but it's also having a little bit of familiarity with the genre or with the rule set or with whatever you're trying to achieve in using an AI tool. And I think that's something that you'll have to experiment with and play. It took me probably like a good year to really get a good handle on prompting. And I'm still learning. I mean, there's so much changes that's happening in the background that I can't even keep up with it all. But nonetheless, I'm going to start with a concept, and if there's anyone watching, if you have a rule set in particular or a concept that you want to work on, I'm willing to work with you on that. You just have to give me some ideas of what you're looking for in regards to creating content. Usually, I use it to do images like handouts, like flat tokens, not top down. And I don't really do battle maps. The top down tokens, the 3D ones, and the Pogs, and then also the well, not so much Pogs, but the 3D top down ones and the virtual tabletop battle maps. I usually buy those. I find that they're higher quality. They usually fit Fantasy Grounds better, and I don't have to spend hours trying to figure out the right prompt for them because those are still very challenging to create with AI. But as far as like handouts, pictures, scenery, kind of like those sort of things, I think those are kind of a good thing to make with AI tools, and then just pay the artist to do the other stuff because I think that's a really cool um, effort to allow them to thrive too. So I kind of have a mixed um, feelings and mixed use cases. So it depends on what you're trying to do. So anyways, without further ado, I'm going to start with Grok, which is X's tool that they have. That's their AI tool. It just came, Grok 3 just came out recently, and basically what it's basically like using ChatGPT, sort of. So if you guys have any questions or comments, or if you guys want to like research into something, we can. I think since if I don't have any takers, I'm just going to do a 5e thing. That's what I'm most familiar with. But what's nice about this is even if you're not totally familiar with it and you have a little bit of familiarity with Fantasy Grounds, this will help you in a lot of ways. So it can help speed up your process. So what I want to do is create a concept for, let's say, an adventure like a one-shot. So what I would do if I was new to this is make a template. So take something like this, for instance, is all the different things that I use for creating content. So that's basically a way that you can basically provide yourself with a foundation for your prompts. And I think that's an important thing to understand when you're creating content for for Fantasy Grounds or any versatile tabletop for that matter. So basically, this is all this stuff here was stuff that I got from the wiki and the effects automation page. So if you use the Atlassian guide for Fantasy Grounds, you kind of get a good idea of some of the content that's required for whatever given rule set it is, provided that it's documented. And then the other thing is that you will find that over time you'll get more and more comfortable with using these types of things, with the AI tools, and it just kind of speeds up your process. That's really what I'm trying to do, is kind of speed it up. I kind of have a lot of fun doing it. I get to the point where I'm doing that more than anything else, is seeing what the results I'll get out of it. So you can't really control AI, but you can kind of steer it. That's the best way I can put it. Even with the best prompts, sometimes you're just not going to get what you want. And I think with the right amount of practice and flexibility, it can help you. But other times it can really make you upset. So it just depends on what's happening. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take a look at the Grok tool, which is the AI from X. And let's think about a concept for a one-shot. So I'm going to create kind of like a template, just to kind of give you an idea of my process. So what I'm going to say is design a one-shot adventure that can be completed in 4 to 6 hours for levels, we'll say 3, 4 to 5 players. I used to do 4 to 6, but I think that's 6 is a little bit too much in some cases. Depends on how much time you have. 4 players is probably ideal for for a good solid 6-hour game. But the more people you add, the less time you usually have for getting the job done. So if you wanted to get through a one shot, it might take you 4 hours with 4 players, but 6 hours with 6 players because of combat and role playing and those sort of things. So when I'm designing these, I have that in mind. So that's just an estimate. I mean, that's obviously going to change and fluctuate, but this is kind of one of the things I think about when I'm designing this, or when I'm prompting Grok to design, is that I want it to kind of fit in this pocket, let's shoot for that. So that way it's not overly complex, but then it's also detailed enough to where you have enough content to run the adventure. I've seen some projects and work out there where they give you the basic story, they give you a couple stat blocks, and that's about it. They don't, and a map, but they don't really give you much else, which isn't always necessarily a bad thing. It could really be useful and gives you more room for page count. So if you have like a PDF, they have to, a lot of times they can't add every single thing, so they have to kind of condense it down, and they have to keep their page count down to a certain amount, especially if they're going to print. So in this case, I'm not too worried about page count, but I definitely have that in mind when it comes to overwhelming the GM or overwhelming the players with information. So there's that too. And now what I'm going to do is on the second line, I'm going to add something like, let's say, design with the RPG industry best standards. Now, this is going to probably research and pull some information off the internet that talks about adventure design, what elements should be in an adventure, those sort of thing. But I always kind of, for myself, I like to base the numbers on 3. So what I'm saying is like the rule of 3s. I'm going to say use the rule of 3s for design concepts such as plot hooks, chapters, parts, sections. So if you have like a one shot, I'd have 3 sections. You can do the 5-room dungeon concept. That's kind of what this is, but I think it's 3 main acts, especially the setup, the start, intro, and then you get into the adventure, and then you have the conclusion. And I think that's probably your biggest tool for a one-shot. And you can do this with a campaign even. So with a campaign, instead of having 3 sections, I might have 6 or 12. Any derivative of 3 or any multiple of 3. That's kind of how I do that. And I kind of got a weird hang up about the number 3 anyway. So it's actually a really big, important number. If you guys have ever contemplated the number 3, it's pretty interesting. But anyways, use the rule of 3s for design concepts such as plot hooks, chapters, parts, and sections. And I'm going to say include in this fashion, and I'm going to give it an example. So when I have this, you have your intro, setup, and GM information, okay? And then you're going to have 3 parts, 3 chapters, or actually it's 3 sections, sorry. 3 sections, 3 chapters, and 3 parts for each. The parts can include any 3 of the following. So I'm kind of giving it a blueprint or like a guide as to how I want it designed. And the reason I do this is so, one, I know what to expect. And when I use this methodology with all of my personal stuff, I kind of know what to expect. It's not all over the place. I got 50 million different ways of doing it. I kind of try to stick to a certain formula or a certain setup every time, even if it's a different rule set. Sometimes I have to vary, like I might do a 5-room dungeon or something like that, but most of the time I usually set it up in 3s or patterns of 3s. Like for instance, a one shot probably be 3 parts or 3 sections. An actual adventure might be 6. And then when I get into a full-length campaign, it might be like 12. So that's kind of where I'm going in size of the content. And then you get into world building stuff, and then it can get even bigger. So I might design a gazetteer or some kind of separate book that goes with it, or a separate thing, so it doesn't get all crammed into one thing. That's another thing, is when we're doing prompt engineering and using AI tools, a lot of us tend to do too much in one conversation, and that tends to break the kind of breaks the quality, and it also overwhelms the token length. So generally you have X amount of characters or words or concepts that you can have in one conversation. Now that has grown a lot. In the last couple of years, it used to be very short. Now it's pretty big, it's pretty beefy. Or what I recommend you do is, if you're going to do a huge project, that you actually break it up into sections. I've even done it to where it's just one chapter at a time. and then I have it prompt where it's going to give me a summary of each chapter, and then I have it tie it all together in a separate conversation. So that way all those elements stay the same and it doesn't change and it doesn't hallucinate or it starts losing information. That's something that's still a thing, although it's not as bad as it was. A couple of years ago, it was very painful, very annoying, and it was a lot of frustration and wasted time. But now it's actually getting better and more responsive and more detailed and all kinds of things. So anyways, 3 sections, 3 chapters, 3 parts for each. The parts can include any of the following. I'll say must or should. I'll say should have a read aloud section. So I like to have, even if I don't use it, I like to have the read aloud section in case I can't think of anything myself. Then I would say GM notes. Let's say tactics, encounters, or hazards, and then loot, if any. And what else? Like consequences or aftermath. Let's see, loot. Oh, puzzles and traps, if any. So these are the parts. So when we have a part, I want each parts to have, I want each thing to have at least 3 pieces to it. So this would be so the parts can include any of the following. Oh, and I gotta say encounters and include dialogue options. So I want it to have, options that are available in case you can't, like, a lot of this really is centered around brain damage, getting old and having the inability to think on the spot sometimes. And, sometimes you get writer's block or you can't tell the story. And I think this will provide a little bit of that so that if you have nothing, you can fall back on it. And that's kind of why I even do this, is because I like to have content in front of me. Even if I don't use it, I have it. And I'd rather have it, or rather not need it and have it than have it and not need it. So, or something, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just nice to have. Some GMs don't need anything. They can just rattle everything off their top of their head. But this really helps with with content creation, but also with having stuff in front of you. So when you go into Fantasy Grounds, you're able to input that information, and that will help you when it comes to designing and adding the text and cutting down on your typing and that sort of thing. And it also helps organize it. So that's really another benefit. So now what I want to do is go back to Grok, and I'm going to put in something that I think most of us may or may not have used, but the Fantasy Grounds has an import tool for tables. And this is true of any rule set. So a lot of it is, let's see, player, there's it's under campaign, under tables. So even if you don't play 5e, you can use the table import tool, and this is what I'm formatting for when I make tables. And all I want is simple text output. Sometimes if you say table in your prompt for AI tool, it will build the actual table, which will work well with the PDF or something. But for Fantasy Grounds, we just need it to be plain text. So generally I'll use delimited, and I want it separated by a pipe symbol, not a colon, not semicolons or commas. So that creates your rows and your columns. And then it says column headers in the first row. Yes. So on the top, that'll be your titles and labels. And then table ranges in the first column, which is your rolled numbers. So that's kind of why I give it this. And this is just a template that I've used over the months. It works pretty well. So what I'm going to say is include I call them rollable lists because if you say table, it's going to make a table a lot of times. So you got to be careful with what you're asking for. And then I'll say the provided text is necessary for parsing in plain text. So I don't want HTML, bold. I don't need any of that. I just need the text because Fantasy Grounds will parse it if it's right. So what I'm going to do is put title. So this is my table title, whatever you want to call it. And then we're going to put so 1D, I just put pound for the number with a space and then the pipe symbol. And then I'm going to put result, or you can change it to whatever you want. So that's the column header on the top. Now I'm going to just give an example of the type of output. So I always use 2 characters or more. So 0, 1 to 10, that sort of thing. And I'll say result 1 and then 0, 2 for result 2. Okay. So here we go. So this is just the basics of how I want the table formatted, the text to come out. And it's not going to give me a bunch of them necessarily. If it fits in the context of the adventure, such as plot hooks, rumors, treasure table, whatever it decides, it's going to give me that. And then I have stat block that I use as my standard. So use the standard, or I'm going to say use the 2024 5e NPC stat block template for the monsters, hazards, vehicles, or other NPCs. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have a template that I created, and I got this actually, I was doing this before, but it's changed recently because of the monster manual, but you can do a legacy one where you're using the older 5e. In this case, I'll just use the 2024 since that's the latest and greatest. But I posted this in our Discord, in our GM section, which essentially gives you an idea of what the actual text formatting should look like. And this is something I've been working on for months, so it's an evolving thing. So it's not always the same. But here is the legacy formatting, and then this up here is the formatting for the new 2025. So I can put this in a document and send it to you guys if you guys want this. But this is the template, depending on the rule set. Now, not all rule sets have a template. Not all of them have the import tool. I think Savage Worlds has Swell. There might be a couple others, but some of it you have to manually copy and paste. So it just depends on how well the rule set's developed and if there was a need for it. So here's the text that I took from our Discord, and I'll go ahead and close this. So I have that in this window here, and this is basically the stat block, and I'm going to put a label on this just in case. So I'll say NPC stat block template, create plain text, do not change formatting or layout due to Fantasy Grounds parsing requirements. So that's quite a bit I'm asking it. This is a lot. Like before, like a year ago, you couldn't do this. Like this would be too much. Like you would confuse the AI tools, and some of the older ones still do get confused. So anyways, that's that. Now I don't know about a theme, but this is going to pick something randomly, so we're going to have to work with that. But if you guys have any theme or setting or anything like that that you want to put in here, you can do that, so it kind of lends itself to whatever you're working on more. So you can give it a theme instead of just a generic make me a one shot. You can actually give it some kind of setting or theme or location or whatever you need it to do. So anyways, I think should we do like horror, or should we do like, your typical fantasy trope thing, or should we do like I don't know, underwater? I mean, it just depends on what you guys want. So I'm gonna say, let's go with a swamp. Okay, so a swamp is I'll say it's kind of like a location, a biome. Use a swamp and wild wilderness setting, or also not setting, but biome for the adventure above. And then you could specify, I want the Yuan-ti or the lizard folk, and maybe it's a war. So imply that there is I'll say an unknown, oh, no, it's not unknown. We'll say imply that there is an ongoing conflict between the Yuan-ti and lizard folk. So this is a conflict that's been going on for years, and that will be in the background. So imply that there is an ongoing conflict between the Yuan-ti and the lizard folk in the region. We'll do something like that. So this is just an example of kind of narrowing it down, like getting it a little more focused and not so random. So you could do it either way, depending on what your needs are. So if you have a setting that you're working on, maybe you have an adventure that's already made or printed, you can upload that to Google LM and query it and come up with stuff for that adventure. So I'll show you that later. So anyway, this is the approach, and this is kind of like the initial start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually ask it to think. So I'm going to ask Grok to reason step by step, which makes it kind of generate a little bit more accurately, and it kind of like gives more thought to the process. You can do a deep search, which will aggressively search the web. So if you were trying to search like wikis and stuff that's already published, or let's say if you use Pathfinder, there might be stuff out there that it'll pull in to help you create content. I use the archives of Nethys, that sort of thing for rules, so it just depends on what sources are available. But I'm going to ask it to think, and I'm going to go ahead and hit this generate button. And generally it thinks for like about a minute or less. So while it's thinking, I wanted to thank you guys for watching, and also to remember that the Fantasy Grounds Academy is pretty much all volunteers. We don't represent Fantasy Grounds directly, although we have worked with them, and we have a pretty good relationship with them. And mainly we're just trying to help you guys learn how to use the platform, but also lately in the last year or so I've been focusing on content creation. So I think this is one of the more rewarding things that you can do with any role-playing game or virtual tabletop, is kind of build your own stuff. I think a lot of the published adventures out there, not all of them, but a good number of them are kind of out of touch with the actual community and with the game itself. I think a lot of them have gone in different directions, or I don't understand exactly what they're trying to do. So I think it's nice to have the ability to create your own content. So now it says below is a fully designed one-shot adventure for 4 to 5 players at level 3, built to RPG industry best standards and adhering to the rule of threes. The adventure is set in a swamp and wild wilderness biome with an ongoing conflict between the Yuan-ti and the lizard folk. Blah, blah, blah. There you go. So that's basically what it did. So it takes all of this information here, and it really made a really nice summary. Even has the table, so I can take this table here, and this is a random encounters table. So I'd have to finesse this a little bit more, but this is a good starting point. So it says 3 giant frogs, a swarm of insects, a crocodile, quicksand, a Yuan Ti Pureblood Scout, and 2 Lizardfolk Hunters. So you could do something like this as a starting point and then have it roll on another table where it actually has the creatures if you want it. So you can take this information and you would copy it, and then you come over here into Fantasy Grounds, and I'm going to paste that information. So this is the format that you want. And then here I'm going to say Swamp Wilderness Encounters. And when you have this set up this way, it should parse in automatically, so you don't have to individually, poke in the numbers and all that sort of thing. And I don't know why, but it did not follow my instruction here. So I want the 0 in front. It's not necessary in this case, but I like it to have 2 digits, but I see what's going on here. So I'm going to hit import and we'll see what happens. So yeah, it did exactly what I wanted. So then what I would do is make another table that actually has these encounters and link it here. That way you can, like if you had 3 giant frogs, I'd build that encounter along with it, the artwork if necessary, and then link it to here. So when you roll that, you just click on the link and it brings up the encounter. So you do something like that. But basically that's one use case for creating content with AI tools. Is it speeds up that process. I mean, you could do this in a word processor, you can use Notepad++, but this really speeds things up once you kind of get a knack for what to ask and how things are to be engineered or prompted. So this thing for the read aloud, it says, as your boots sink into the muddy edge of the Serpent Marsh, the air grows thick with the drone of insects and the distant croaks of unseen creatures. Twisted trees draped in the moss rise from murky, knee-deep water, their roots clawing at the earth. The oppressive heat clings to your skin, and a faint, sour stench wafts on the breeze, an omen of the dangers ahead. And then it says GM notes, terrain. The swamp is difficult terrain, half movement, due to mud and water. Quicksand patches with a DC 13 perception to spot and a DC 14 to escape pose risks. And that's basically the beginning of this. So in this case, you could take this information and start building your own content using the book format. So for our library, if you click on books, these are the books that I have loaded, but you can click campaign and this will create kind of a starting point for adding your own content. So you basically kind of like making your own PDF module type thing. But what I recommend is that you do this in a separate campaign from your actual game. That way you can modify this and change it or play in your game without modifying it. And then when you're done, you can export this content and use it in more than one place instead of just being kind of cornered into your campaign. So this is a nice way to kind of add content and then export it later when you need it, especially if you're going to play in multiple sessions. So that's where that comes in handy. So basically, what I want to do is create a new chapter, and what we'll call this is Shadows Over the Serpent March. I don't necessarily like that title, so you can always change that. But if you are going to change it, it helps if you do it in the beginning. That way you're not reiterating just for one little change. That's another thing you got to be careful on with AI tools, is let's say one word is spelled wrong or you don't like the spelling or the name of something. I wouldn't go and ask it to redo it 5 times just to change one little thing. If it's something that small, I would just move on and just make a note of it. And later on, you could change it here in Fantasy Grounds instead of wasting your iterations in your AI tool. So we're going to do new subchapter, we'll say. So this is the introduction, setup, and GM information. And then we'll do a new page. So now you get this little page thing here, and you're faced with these options. So this is the, we'll say the introduction. introduction. And then we'll do we can do I'm going to do a header first. So we'll say shadows over the serpent. Shadows over the serpent marsh. Like serpent swamp. Kind of rhymes, but I see what they're doing. So now you can add, if you wanted to add a picture. So let's just say we want a cover. Okay. I usually don't do covers until the end because a lot of different things can change. But I'm just, for the sake of the show here, I'm going to do a cover. So this is a AI paid program called Ideogram. I think it does a pretty good job, especially like if you wanted to add text. So what I'm going to do is prompt it. So I'm going to say create a full-sized cover image. I'll say a full-sized, I'll just say image. I don't want to say cover because then it might change it. A full-size image of a fantasy. Now I don't want to say fantasy because then it gets too fantasy. Let's see, create a full-size image of a mysterious and dim, I'll say subtropical swamp with rotting trees. We'll say hanging vines and marshy, muddy ground. I will say, let's see, what else do I want to put in here? And I'm going to make this a square. So you have aspect ratio. So this is 16:9. This will fit in here, or I can make it 9:16, like this, and then put it over here on the left, and then have like the text over here on the right. So maybe I'll do that. Actually, I'll do a square because that'll fit right here. So it'll be a marshy, muddy ground. Add, I'll just say natural outdoor lighting with gloomy clouds and rain. And then I'm going to say 35mm camera shot. So this will bring up the detail quite a bit. So now I'm going to put it on, let's see, the aspect ratio. So this is, you can put it on general, realistic. So I'll try general first. And then here's the model. You can set it to private or public. And the magic prompt helps you with prompting. So if you write it and it's in a different language, or you're not sure how the wording is, it will kind of help you with that. I don't use it, tend to use it, but if you're new, it helps a lot. So let's hit generate. Let's see, create a full-sized image of a mysterious and dim. Okay, let's see what it looks like. So here you can't really control exactly what you're going to get, and you can reiterate this if you want. So it depends on what you're trying to do. So this is the swamp. So not bad. I like it. So what I might do is, since it's kind of too, it looks almost too photographic. If you want it more fantasy looking, like not so photographic, let's do that. So retry. And I'm going to say a mysterious, let's see, create a full-size RPG image cover. I do like the picture. It's just a little too realistic. Let's see, an RPG cover. And then I'm going to say, I'll get rid of the camera shot. We don't want that. So that's what kind of brought out the photo quality. And I will say, shadows over the serpent marsh. Shadows over the serpent marsh. Okay, and in green, yellow, black, and white, I'll say beige too. Kind of want some earthy tones. Beige instead of yellow. We'll leave yellow in there. And I'll say a swamp-like theme. So we want the text, to match. So a title logo that reads. So you can add text in this one very well. Some of the other, this is one reason I use this one, because the other ones don't do very well with text still, even though they're better than they used to be, but this one seems to be more consistent. So now let's see what happens. So we want this to be a little bit more fantasy and less photo. So the reason why this one did it is because I actually said camera. So it kind of took a it kind of looks manufactured or fake, but then it also looks realistic. I think that's a little too much. So now we have different qualities. So this isn't too bad, but I don't like the logo. And it messed up here, or it says eMoods. I don't know what that's supposed to be. That's a little better. See, now it looks a little too cartoony for me. I mean, it looks okay. It looks great. It'll pass. But so what I'll do here is I'm going to retry. But this time, instead of doing general, I'm going to say realistic. And even though that kind of conflicts with this, it'll probably put out a little bit better quality. So I'm going to say create a full size, I'll say no, not high quality, professional designed. Let's see what that looks like. So as you can see, you're going to spend a lot of time figuring out the limitations and the strengths of whatever AI tool you're using. So this one, I found out that it will go one way or the other depending on how you word it and how it comes out. So this is closer to what I was looking for. So shadows over the serpent swamp. That's not too bad. Yeah, still not quite what I was looking for, but I don't like the text. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So retry, and I'll say a title instead of logo. A title that blends into the image and reads. So I want it to kind of be more part of the image and not just some logo stamped on top of a photo. So that's kind of, you have to play with whatever tool you're using. Like ChatGPT, Midjourney, they'll all do something kind of similar. It just depends on what you ask. And I didn't mind this, actually. I just don't like the text. It looks kind of... Okay, so that's a little bit better. So now I'm going to try again, but I'm going to do general, and we'll see what happens there. So this is about the maximum number of times I want to try this. If it doesn't work, I'll start over, because you're just going to spend hours for one little thing, and it's just going to drive you nuts. Okay, here we go. Now we're getting somewhere. So that's okay. This is the one I kind of like. So something like that. So this is the style I would prefer. It's kind of role-playing. Shadows over the shadows. See, this is where this gets messed up. So what you could do is take this, and you can actually edit this out if you wanted to. I'm just going to have it redo it. So retry. Shadows over the serpent. Okay, so I have the settings from before. See, it kind of messed up. It added this extra word, which I didn't want. So that's one of the things you'll come across when you add text to AI, is that it will do that. Kind of like that. That's kind of cool. Shadows over, I'm going to go for it. I did say I wasn't going to do this again, but I'm going to say I'm going to say with serpent tails and snake heads. Let's see what that comes up with. I'm going to be, because if the text comes out to where it actually has like snakes and scales and stuff, that'll even look cooler. Because it'll kind of blend in a little bit more. It won't just look like I went into Canva and slapped some. Yeah, here we go. So this has a little bit more design to it, which I think is way cooler anyways. So that's okay. That one's not bad. I don't know what you guys think. Which one? This one looks good too. So I like this one or this one. What do you guys think? I don't know. But that I would use that in Fantasy Grounds as my cover. So what I would do is download all the images as I create them. And normally I would create them all. I'd probably build the structure of the module, then create all the images, then import them, organize them, do all that stuff, and then associate them with where they need to go. So what I'll do is I'll just put an image block for now, kind of like a placeholder. And then when I get the image, I'll plug that in. So I would take this and shadows over the serpent marsh. Yeah, so that it looks pretty good. It's not too bad. So I don't know, but you could take this and you could copy this image and put it into Grok, and you could say edit image, and you can say please add more of the themes and ideas from the adventure text above. So we'll see how Grok does with images. I don't use it for images, but you might find use for it. I've never found an AI tool that does everything. I think ChatGPT is about as close as you're going to get to that, but I don't think it does it as well as Ideogram. And I've used Grok before for images. They were okay. Oh, wow, it's already cooler. Wow. Oh, wow, I think I got a winner here. I don't mind that. I mean, that's, you see here, it said Sarsh instead. So this is what I'm saying. Like, yeah, this is actually a much cooler, way cooler image, but it messed up the text. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you're gonna find that to be the case. I'll say shadows over the serpent marsh. And then I'm going to say fix the text, comma. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if it can do it. A lot of times, though, AI tools don't do well with both text and images. That's why I use Ideogram. It seems to be more consistent. And that's really what started me using it, because I was using, Midjourney and all those other image generation tools, but those were even, to me, those were worse. It just drove me nuts. I want to have text that kind of blends in and not just a label slapped over the, yeah, see, it still can't figure out the text. So this is kind of what I'm saying. So what I would probably do with this is put it back into Ideogram and then see if it can straighten it out. So these are just some of the stuff or the crap that you're going to come across when you are working with AI tools, because they don't always do well. And sometimes it ain't worth it. It'll just frustrate the hell out of you. But anyways, this is kind of one of the things I do, is make images that are based off the content. And you don't need to make 50,000 images. You can make like maybe a dozen or less, and use those for handouts to give to your players. And if you already have assets like tokens and stuff, you can put those in Grok and have it redesign them for you and see if it can handle it. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. But I've taken top-down tokens that I've purchased and put them in the AI tool and ask it to change the colors, or maybe male to female or female to male or whatever. And sometimes it can do it. It'll take the image and recreate it. It gives you a little bit more flexibility and more value out of your purchases. You can do it with battle maps, but I still find that what it tries to do, especially if the map has a grid on it, is it tries to make a grid, and often that grid is not even, and it doesn't line up with anything in Fantasy Grounds. So that just frustrates me. So I try to avoid anything that says battle map or grid or map. I just give it the image and I say recreate, and I might say change the colors or something like that, or an element of it. But the minute you say map, virtual tabletop, anything like that, it's going to try to recreate it as such. And it's just going to be frustrating because it'll give it weird, like a rose compass, and if you say map. So don't say map, don't say battle map, don't say virtual tabletop, don't put any of that in the prompt, because it's going to try to emulate what's already into its training, and it's just going to piss you off. That's the honest answer. So what if you're going to use top-down tokens or anything like that, I would not say those keywords, because it's going to try to iterate off its training instead of off the picture, and it's just going to be frustrating. So just be careful with that. Anyway, so this is the introduction, and I'm going back to ideogram, and what I'll do, like I said, is I'll put another image in, but I think this will work. This shadows over the Serpent Marsh. I don't think I need to do anything else. This is good enough. I mean, for a one-shot handout, personal use, yeah. If I was going to sell this and make money off it or something, I might spend more time on it or hire somebody to do it. But, for something like your home games, probably not that big of a deal. All right, so this is essentially the kind of the workflow. So you would create all your images, you build your structure of your adventure, and then you start copying and pasting in all the elements, and then build your assets like your tokens, maps, your NPCs, tables, all that stuff. You got to build that as well. And that's kind of the process you'd go through if you're going to do a conversion anyway. So instead of doing a conversion, you're just adding your own content. So we looked at ideogram, we looked at Grok, and I'm going to go back in our history here. So like here it made this Meyer Stalker, Lizardman Shaman, Serpentis the Yuan-ti High Priest. Let's take a look at that. So what we're going to do is take Serpentis. I don't like the name, but I'm not going to worry about that. Serpentis, whatever. Okay, so copy this and then go into Fantasy Grounds. And we're going to pull up NPCs. So this is the 5e rule set. Now, like I said, a lot of the other rule sets may not have the NPC import tool, but 5e does. So I'm going to click on this little hamburger menu, and I'm going to paste in the stat block that I copied from Grok. So Control V is in Victor, and it looks right. But if you want a preview of what the text would look like if it needs to be cleaned up, so you can right click and click on this wand. It'll say clean up text. It just gets rid of extra spaces and weird lines and stuff, line breaks. And this is that. So, but before I paste that in, what I want to do is I'll say create just the lore, or I'll say just the background, lore, tactics, and appearance for Serpentis. I think Serpentis is a horrible name. Let's see. I don't know what you guys think, but Serpentis? I don't think so. Okay, so tactics. See, it's not that creative. I mean, that's where the human mind is better, I think. So tactics and appearance for Serpentis. But I'm going to say in the context of our adventure narrative. So I want it to not only just give it that information, but I kind of want it to be in context of the adventure, not just a generic background. And it still thinks I want image. Well, we'll see what it does for the image. Yeah, that's not what I want. But as you can see, it's kind of stumbling over the text. Create just the text. And I had it on edit image. That's why it did that. So I didn't switch out of the tool I was in last. All right, so now we're going to get the background. We'll put it over here on the right-hand side. So when you're using the stat block importer, just the stat block information goes on the left, and then any of the other additional information should go on the right. And that's just for parsing. If it has extra stuff that it doesn't know what to do with, it'll break the import. So that's kind of one of the things you have to get used to, or at least practice with, because if one little thing is out of place, it'll break this. And it's really annoying, but it's just part of how it is. It's how it's designed, so it automatically parses. But you got to use an official stat block, otherwise, for your template. Okay, so this is basically so we're gonna make that bold, or this will be like a title, and then these things here, I'm just putting a bold formatting. Okay, so if everything is right, like all this text is correct, I'm not missing commas, I don't have extra things in here. I was trying to do this last week, and after the word traits, it had a couple semicolons, and then this stat block thing had changed. So this used to be vertical, but now it's horizontal, and so that it's changing, it's evolving. So you gotta account for that. So import. Let's see what happens. Yeah, that looks good. So this is the end result. Let me move this over. And I leave this open. Don't close this until you know you're done. Or if you're going to do another one, just to hit Control A and delete. If you reset this, it's going to change your filter if you change that below. So you got to be careful with that. So this is the end result. It looks like it parsed correctly. It's got the stats, all this stuff up here, the spell casting statement, the bonus action, and then here's the notes. So here's all of the summary, which looks really nice. And then if you have pictures like art, you would do that here. So let's do that. Let's go to ideogram. And this time, we're going to create. Now this is where I think this program does pretty well. So I'm going to say create a full body image of a Yuan. It may not know what Yuan Ti is, but I'm just going to put that in there. A Yuan Ti serpent. I'll say an anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphic Yuan Ti serpent. I'll say snake humanoid. And this is like a priest, right? So we'll say kind of shamanic more than sorcerer. So shamanic. I'll just say with a vile and menacing face and a small forked tongue with scaly skin. we'll say scaly green and yellow and black skin. I'll say comma dressed in dark indigenous and natural robes. So I kind of want it to be more wild instead of civilized, I guess. And then I'll say she, this is going to be a woman, I guess, or female. She is wearing, I'll say hide leather strap leggings and sandals. And the reason I'm doing this is because if you don't mention their feet, sometimes it will focus on their face or whatever you had prompted for and leave the feet out. So in other words, when it makes the image, you're only going to get like the top half. You're not going to get the full body length. So that's kind of why I prompt it this way. And that's something you will learn over time is how does this image fit into the space? And then I'm going to say say a plain white background. And the reason I'm doing this is so that we can remove the background easier. I do like to have the decorations in the background, but when you want to use it for a token or for an insert or something, you got to be able to take that background out. So this is a good way to do that, is to say I want a plain, plain white background. So we're going to say, we'll try auto at first. No, actually general. No, auto. And then it's going to be a 9 by 16. So that's, vertical. And let's see what it does. So as you can see, it takes a bit to get used to prompting and how you want it to turn out. But so far, even with this preview, I like what I see. Yeah, that's really cool. So that's a kind of a cool thing. I like that style. That works. I really like that, but that's too realistic. But yeah, that's really neat looking. All right, so this looks like cosplay here. It looks like a woman with with the snake pants. This one looks kind of semi like a sculpture. This one looks like something closer to what I want. And then this one looks like it's just like artwork. So I'm going to try it again. So I'm going to retry. I'm going to say create a full body RPG illustration instead of just image of an anthropomorphic Yuan-ti snake humanoid with a vile and menacing face and a small forked tongue with, okay, so we'll see what happens. And as you can see, it kind of ignored the idea that I had that background. So what I'm going to do is put general and let's see what happens. So this is, just some of the things. Okay, here we go. This is a lot closer to what I was looking for. So this isn't bad. I can handle that. This one is super cool. So if I'm going to keep this, what I would do is, in this case, Ideogram has the ability to remove the background. So with one click of the button, I can have the background removed. That's another reason I use this. That one's pretty cool, but it's not really the art style. I mean, I like this style, but I want more like this art style. And then this one isn't bad either. So I might use this for a different individual, even though it's not exactly what I had in mind, but it's close enough. So I'll remove the background for that. So now I got 2 for 1. So now I can export this and use this as I can, use the online tools to make a POG. And then I can also create this to be one of those 3D stand-up type images for when you go into 2D, 3D mode. So this would probably go back here in the picture area, and then I'd make a POG for this token. And then the camera token would be this without the background. And then the picture might be this overlaid onto that other image that I made, which was the swamp background. So I can use that and kind of put this in the image if I wanted to. So I would use something like Canva, which is something I use for pulling content together. So Canva does a pretty good it does a pretty good job with this stuff. So let me make me an image. So I would do something like that, and then go back to Ideogram, and let me go back to my creations here. So what I'd probably do is take like this thing here, whatever these, maybe I'd use this one, I don't know. The only thing about this is it might not match the artwork, but it will give the impression. So maybe you would use one of these or something, but probably use this one, copy this image, do something like this, minus the text, and put that image of the snake, the Yuan Ti snake woman in there. So you could do something like that. So maybe this here. Remove background. Makes it so much easier. Hit copy image and then paste this into here. So maybe you would do something like that, just as an example. So this is, things you can do to kind of speed up the process. Obviously, it's taken a while because I have to explain it. But if you're organized and you have like all of your content figured out, it really speeds up things. You can probably knock out a really decent one-shot adventure in less than a week, only working about 2 or 3 hours or maybe an hour and a half at a time. So maybe a total of 8 hours, you could have a really nice product with art and everything. So that's kind of why I like using AI tools for this type of thing. So it kind of depends on, what your needs are and what you're trying to do. But essentially, that really does speed up production. And a lot of times I had commissioned artists to make something for me, and I'm not organized enough in the beginning. So when I need like a cover, I got to wait like 3 months to a year to get it. So this kind of gets around that. I think that's one of the only things I can say against me is I'm pretty impatient. I need the artwork when I need it. I don't want to wait a month to a year to get it. So unless it's a big paid project, I'm not going to bother commissioning anything. Now, if it's something very special and I want to hang it in my room or something, yeah, I'll do that. But when it comes to running games and having content, this works really well. All right, so let's see. I got that, and there's just shadows over the Serpent Marsh. Okay, yep, and that might be part of the cover. You never know. All right, so I'm going to look at Google LM now. So we looked at Grok for writing. So what I want to do is take all of this information from the adventure, and I'm going to say rewrite the adventure with a little more descriptive text and format for, I'll say, copy and paste plain text. No, I'll just say for copy and paste. So we'll see what it does. And that's another thing is every time you ask it something, you don't always know what you're going to get. Not the first time. So it's rewriting it. And What I would probably do to make this easier for me is one, I would paste it into Fantasy Grounds just so I have the text. So I don't have to keep going back and forth. Because that's where you lose a lot of time. And that's why it's, if you're going to have a big project, you kind of want to work in groups. So you would do all your images, do all your encounters, do all your NPCs first. That sort of thing will cut down the amount of back and forth. That's where you lose time. It's kind of like when you do those time studies at work, like like the spaghetti chart, where you have a person that keeps going back and forth and they're losing all that time in between operations. So have you ever done any of those kind of type of things at work where you're studying how long it takes to do certain things? It does cut down on time if you're organized and you do it in sections. If it's just kind of like a small thing, you don't have to worry about it. But if you've got more than a few of each, I would figure out some kind of methodology so that you're not jumping around. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this is probably take and copy and paste all this whole thing, this whole adventure. Yeah, this even got the stat blocks. This is really cool. It's still writing it too. Okay, so what I'm going to do is hit copy. And then normally what I'll do is I'll just add something like a note. So under player notes, I might just say text notes, not even worried about what it is, and then just copy and paste it there. That way I have all the text. I don't care about the format right now. I just want the text in Fantasy Grounds so I can work from here instead of going back and forth, back and forth. And then the other thing I'm going to do is if this was a finished product or close to it, then I would go to Notebook LM, which is a Google product. Let me minimize that. And this is research for the Fantasy Grounds 2024 5e content, but I would probably create a new thing, or I would do something like that. Like here's module creation, 5e bias. So these are different things that I've created, but I'll make a separate one. So I'm going to add sources. So this is the way to I guess to organize existing content. So I'm going to use copy text, hit Control V, and that's going to copy and paste all the text that's associated with this adventure. And that's going to insert that as a source. Let's go to a wiki. And here's a wiki. Here's a Forgotten Realms one. Let's look at this one, because they don't necessarily want it to be in. Okay, this is Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse variants. Volo's Guide. So you can do this and add different sources to your content depending on what you're trying to do. So this case, I'm going to go to add source, and we're going to go to a website, and we're going to put that in there. And I might do this for a couple different things, but what this does is it gives the research tool a place to pull information from. So you can set all this up ahead of time. Like if you're doing Pathfinder or Cyberpunk or whatever, you can point it to the wiki guides, and that will help give it context and a basis for the research. It does have some AI capabilities, but I wouldn't say it's strengths or generation. It's more at taking what's already there and organizing it and giving it more polish, I'd say. So then I might go, let's see. So we're talking about that. Well, just in case, I'll do this one. I also want to take this image and put that in Grok. So let's take that, and we'll cheat a little bit. We'll use this image as a base later. And then what we'll do is I'm going to actually, first I want to take the URL link. and add that to Google LM. And the reason I'm doing this is for campaign management and world building. So you can have all kinds of context with your project that you're working on, and add a source. And we're going to go with the website. And I'm going to hit Control V. But you can also add PDFs. So if you have a PDF that's under a couple, I don't remember, I think it's 30 megabytes or something like that, you can add it here as well. So if you have a whole bunch of like Pathfinder stuff, you can upload it. You can add the YouTube videos. Like if there's a video that talks about the WAN-T, I can add that in there, whatever. And it, just like source material, so you have some kind of context. So with this WAN-T thing, I'm going to try different iterations. So I'm going to edit image, Control V. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I want the actual image. So take that, copy image, and then what I'm going to say is I'll see if it can handle this. So create an evil priestess version with a snake staff. And I'll try this in ideogram, see which one does better. So it can take the existing image and kind of like copies it, or it gives, it'll take the basics of it and create something out of it. So that's interesting. So not exactly what I had in mind, but it does do something here. So it took the concepts, basically the coloring and some of the ideas, and turned it. So this one isn't too bad. I might use that somewhere like a handout or something, but let's see what happens in ideogram. So in ideogram, you can do something similar. So in this case, I have to download the actual image. So that's the only thing I don't like is, oh, no, I don't. Now you can paste it. So what I want to do is remix, but I want to say create, I'll say an evil, I'll say anthro I'll say with a snake staff. We'll see if it gets it right or gets closer. So I tried using Grok. It kind of did it, but it didn't. I wasn't prepared for that output. And then what you can do is go to Remix. And it says the creatures wields a large, we'll say, instead of curved sword, we'll say a magic serpent staff. And we'll say humanoid female. It's adorned with arcane robes and magical bracers on its wrists. So all I'm doing is kind of taking the existing image and asking it a little bit different. Okay, and then we'll say, now the image weight is going to take the exactness of this image. So if I jack this up, this is going to look more like the original, but if I tone it down a little bit, so go to 40% weight, it'll create something a little bit more unique. But I want to say white background, just in case, because it will create, like a jungle or something in the background if you don't you're not careful. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to remix that image. And you can do this with, if you have other images that you find, you can remix it. It takes the color and the shape and some of the elements of it and redoes it. So this isn't too bad. So that's that. That one's cool. So this almost looks like a Pathfinder one. So I'm going to take and remove the background on that. That one's pretty cool. But see yeah, that's really neat. Okay, so that's that. But then if I retry this and then I bring the image weight up, so instead of 50%, now it's at 60 instead of 40. So it'll be closer to the original image. So it may not work out right because it might be, it might still include the sword or something like that. We'll see. Yeah, see, it's trying to keep with the original more. But it still kind of worked. But the more likeness of it, the less likely it's going to get what you want. Yeah, that's pretty cool right there. So that's within 40 to 60%, depending on which way you go, is probably the best. Now, if you went up really high or really low, it will look nothing like or too much like the original, or it will break it because you're asking it for something that it's not representing. So that's why you have to kind of weigh that. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So you can use a lot of these images for your tokens and stuff if you're going to do it. But that's basically how you do this. And then once you have that stuff and you got all your sources, now what it's saying is I'm going to ask it what factions are involved in the adventure. So now you can query your content. So now it gives you all this. So why this is helpful is if you have a bunch of PDFs and websites, then you can query them and start building off that and not spend hours upon hours scanning through PDFs looking for one bit of information. So if you wanted to search multiple sources at once, this would be the way to go. How does the swamps terrain impact travel? So, this is kind of just some generic stuff, but the swamp's terrain significantly impacts travel in the Serpent Marsh. The terrain is described as treacherous, expansive, difficult terrain. Here's a breakdown of how the terrain affects movement. So these are the things that and I kind of like that. I like the feedback, and I can save it to my notes because I like the information. And what I'll do is take this information from here, go back to Grok, turn off the image editing, and I'm going to put that information in here, and I'm going to say create this type of summary for each natural hazard or trap. And then it'll reiterate on that. And then I can put that information, if I like the output, back into Google LM. So hazard, poisonous gas vent is in Act 2, Chapter 1, Part 2. There's the Yuan-ti pitfall. There's the floating maze. And those are the summaries of what's in the adventure. So I take all this and put that into Google LM. And you say you just go back and forth until that might be too much. Yeah, you can't, in the case of sources, we don't want to do too much. So add a note. So what I'll do is I'll add this as my notes instead. And I'll convert it to a source. And then that way, if I want to know what traps are there and that sort of thing, then that's already there. And then going back to Grok, I'm going to say, now create one NPC stat block for I'll say one generic NPC stat block for the hazards, traps, environmental challenges, and I'll say potential. Create one generic, one potential, or one generic NPC stat block for the potential adventure, hazards, traps, environmental challenges like rainstorms within the context of the adventure narrative. So you kind of want it to be themed for your adventure, otherwise it might give you some random crap. I'm kind of used to that with ChatGPT. So now create one generic. Okay, I'm going to say use the template and the ability scores should all be 10. So I'm going to make one generic stat block for the challenges. So rainstorm surge, falling debris, toxic eruption. So then there's the adventure narrative, there's the notes. So what I'm going to do is same thing as here's the NPC import. And what I've learned is that for stat blocks that are for like traps and that, I think it's easier just having one, especially if you only have a few. So Serpent Marsh Hazard is the name of the stat block, and it has all the actions listed separately. And that way, and then I'll take this context, the Serpent Marsh Hazard, this is the notes. So the GM can run it. Oops. I'll say this is for the GM. GM information. And then I'll right click, clean up the text. Here's some, here's the notes. So narrative usage for GMs, placement, deploy the hazard during movements of travel for exploration, to heighten tension, such as when the party is moving between key locations, like after leaving the Lizardfolk village or approaching the Yuan-ti outpost. Customization, choose the swamp's wrath effect that best fits the narrative moment. For example, use rainstorm surge during a dramatic escape, falling debris near a crumbling ruin, or toxic eruption in an area corrupted by the Yuan-ti's ritual. So this actually gives the GM information on how to possibly use it. So this is really helpful, especially if you're new. I hit even if you're not new. I mean, this really is helpful. So here's the stat block, and anything that can be parsed, like the saving throw is automated, the damage is automated, and this way you don't have to have 6 stat blocks. You can just have one that has 3 or 4 hazards on it. And that's a lot easier to manage. You don't even have to put this on the combat tracker. It can just be pinned to a map or pinned to the story entry, like in your campaign, in your book. If you're gonna, you can link this if you're gonna use it in the section that it belongs. So it's up to you how you want to do it. But I think that's all I really am going to go over today. But you can see the utility, and you could really cheat and pretty much come up with a pretty solid adventure in probably 3 days, I'd say. And that includes having to work and everything. So You spend about 2 or 3 hours a day or an hour after work throughout the week, you can probably get a lot of this done. So if you worked on a weekend like I'm doing now, I don't have time during the week. So if I put 6 hours into this, I could probably have a solid, polished one-shot adventure with art, tokens, everything. But that's with practice, having an understanding of the tools, and knowing Fantasy Grounds a little bit. You kind of have to know those things to help bring this stuff to life, but you don't have to, but it helps. It speeds things up. So Google LM, I use that to organize content. Ideogram, I use to make images, logos, that sort of thing. Grok, I use for the writing and the brainstorming. And then occasionally I'll use ChatGPT or I'll use Canva to edit the design. So that's basically what I wanted to show you guys. And maybe this wasn't very helpful to a majority of you, but I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are starting to harness the power of AI. And this is something you can do to help speed up your game prep and that sort of thing. You don't necessarily have to build content to sell, but if you do, make sure that you mention you're using AI and all that stuff. But anyhow, folks, you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. And like I said, I prefer to have a commissioned art piece over, AI stuff. But, if you need the content right now, I mean, this is a quick way to do it. And it also depends on, what you're doing and that sort of thing. But anyways, I hope that's helpful. And the links for this content that I'm using, not the pictures and stuff, but the AI tools I'm using will be in the video description at the end. So this will help you with that. And just remember that, I like to support like Frog God Games and, Kobold Press and all the different publishers, because I think they deserve that. And I think that these tools would benefit them if they were able to harness it properly, and if the stigma or the AI controversy wasn't such a big deal. It would really increase their work output, but not necessarily the quality. But it would get a lot more done. But nonetheless, this is something that you have to decide if it's for you or not. Some people hate AI. Some people don't want anything to do with it. That's cool. I'm cool with that. Whatever. But I use it just for like mostly personal stuff. So again, have a good one. Happy weekend, I guess. And I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Leave me some comments.